full name is Sisekelo Mkhululingwazi, but y'all call me MK. I am the director and the writer and the cameo actor on this film. What's it called again? Thicker Than Water. Yeah. I think what really attracted me to the story more than anything else, it was how close it hit to home for me. I really liked the similarity and the differences and the similarity and the sort of conflict that arose between people who come from the same space, the same time, but they grow up in different contexts. I really like the idea of how language and miscommunication can be the source of our entire sort of suffering as people. It's a cool angle to take, I thought.
I am Pozisa Nombembe, the producer and production designer, costume makeup stylist of the film Thicker Than Water. What attracted me to the story is I got it early on during the holidays when I had to write the proposal, going through the full proposal process and doing the research into what would make the story the best that it can be, and also gaining an inspiration from when I was doing the research earlier on. I found this project done by Miller called Unequal Scenes, and that jumped out to me a lot, how in South Africa the inequality and the societies in which we inhabit, the inequality happens right next door from each other, and how that can now be told within a film that's locally produced.
Okay, my name is Lungelo Ngobo and I am I am the DOP/colorist for Thicker Than Water. Okay, what really attracted me to the story is the narrative. So Sfiso in the story, we see that he actually loses a parent, and I myself, his dad hasn't been in his life. My dad hasn't been in my life, and I've been with my mom my whole entire life. And I know how it would affect me if I were to lose my mom. It would really affect me so much. Even though I wouldn't be violent, but it would lead me to doing something bad. So yeah, that's really what attracted me to the story.
Yeah, my name is Indipile Gaba. I'm 21 years old actually, and I'm the sound designer of Thicker Than Water. Mostly what attracted me to the story was mainly because it's very South African rooted. It's very true. Here we are looking at the lives of two guys who live in South Africa, who live in different backgrounds. So with that being said, we kind of just also looking at how inequality is really an issue in South Africa, and it being a wake-up call to everyone around to say, hey guys, can we observe what our world is becoming? Because at this point we're just seeing it as the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. So what can we do as people in terms of understanding where all these people come from? And we're all very connected as humans. So I think it also showed how the world is small, basically, but large at the same time.
Hi, my name is Uzipho Masengemi and I am the editor of Thicker Than Water. So when I first got the script, what attracted me was the theme of inequality, specifically black inequality, because I lived through that, so how I lived in a township but my whole life was in suburbs and stuff. So I know how that feels and how different people carry themselves, Usfiso carries himself differently from Usipho.
My name is Kuhlewonke Zuma. I'm an actress and I play the character of Nonjabulo on Thicker Than Water film. I'd say the narrative of the story, because there are different elements in the film where I actually resonated with the character, taking into account the last scene whereby Nonjabulo witnesses her father's death. I resonate with that because my dad passed away in 2018, so I used those emotions to fuel the character.
Okay, so igama Fizile Mkhize, ngidlala irole ya Lily kwi-film Thicker Than Water. The narrative itself, I feel it's something that has never been should I say seen before, or I feel like a lot of people can relate to the story Yona itself, like for example, like the journey of Sfiso going through what he went through, losing his mother, being wanted by people, Ngomoya Owishimali, having to just handle all of that, and at the same time having to suck it in and be indoor, because that's how men supposed to be portrayed, as you have to just be tough. But which is, I feel like a lot of people, like society, can relate to the story Yona itself. So yeah.
Before like the pandemic and everything, like we went wild. I remember us doing the shortlist and we were working with movements and stuff because of location shoots and how we worked around that.
With sound, what we don't realize mostly is that sound is everything around us. Sound can be that simple movement of a tree. It's literally everything around us.
We knew about this virus. Like, it was very exciting. Me, Zippo, and MK, which is the editor and director, we went wild. We went seriously wild in terms of shots, the match cards and everything, lighting.
Experimental filmmaking. I remember I was asked this once during like our screenwriting classes, and I said one of the things in terms of like the type of filmmaker I want to be is I believe in the what the fuck. I want something to ask questions. I want you to be provoked. I want you to, when you watch and experience a Posisa Nombembe film, it must be something that leaves you either scarred, changed, broken, and reformed again.
Filmmaking to me is breaking boundaries, like breaking every rule, breaking everything you're taught and told how to do, like in terms of AFTA, in terms of the industry. So how I broke the rules and experimented is by breaking the 180-degree rule, because ever since I came here I've been taught that we have to stick to the 180-degree rule. But in our film we kind of break that rule, and that's how we experiment.
Trying to act with no boundaries, trying to not limit yourself in terms of building this character, in terms of bringing Sfiso to life. So when I looked at Sfiso, my biggest challenge was trying not to judge his background, trying not to judge the actions that he makes. I was trying to understand more and question him more on why he does it, so that when it's time that I have to be in front of the camera, it's more of I understand than I'm still questioning him. And maybe if a director's giving me a note, I'm able to tell him why I think this. So yeah, I think for me experimenting was trying not to set boundaries, trying to be limitless.
Firstly, I'd say it's the door knocking scene. That for me was challenging because now I had to think, oh my gosh, how do you open a door? How do you knock? Do I listen? Do I call someone out? That was very challenging.
What challenged me the most is, I think, the extremities of where you can go. I like to push things, and I think even with this film, there's so much like further that we could have gone, and I think it's going to that place, because sometimes if you go too much to the extreme, you can like lose people. And you very bit story.
The exciting moment was working with the crew, like being able to gel, especially with editor and director, being able to communicate the different shots like we take, if it's gonna work for our edit and everything.
The exciting moment on set for me was this whole script being a very deep and serious one that requires a lot of emotion and sensitivity.
The humor on set. I mean, we're doing such a very heartfelt, such a meaningful, such a genuine story, and also being able to focus on the story we're telling. We also had to focus on creating a very light environment on set, because being set is tiring.
And everyday life and everyday people and everyday thoughts and everyday situations, that inspires me a lot. And the sort of ideas that lie beneath, like sort of what we see every day, you know, because the word is just the word, like what it means and how it makes people feel, that has a lot to do with so much that's never spoken about, so much that can't be put into words.
My themes is life and empathy. So how am I representing life? It's just mainly creating the space, setting the audience in that specific world that I want them to be in.
Okay, for the film, my theme is water. And how it's represented in the film is through movement of the camera. So you know that water is never still. Ocean water is never still, river water is never still. So how I represented it in the film is by having different camera movements, like tracking, zooming in, zooming out, but there's a lot of movement in the film. That's how it was represented.
My themes are empathy and rebirth. Naturally, I'm a very empathetic person. I am able to understand people and their feelings because I believe you need to understand other people, where they're coming from. So taking into account the film itself, I was able to sympathize with Usfiso, understanding his background, understanding why he made the decisions that he made, killing my father in the film. At the end of the day, you need to understand where a person comes from and not judging them because of their upbringing.
My themes are rebirth, and how I best represent them is, I guess, in the way that I decided to produce this film, as well as then our marketing and the way we're choosing to do that, because making use of like the cycle of samsara, it speaks to life, death, and rebirth is also that state of redemption, because now that we're telling the story of inequality, it now poses the question to the audience of, you can't watch a story like that and still continue in the path that we've been living all this time. As South Africa, we've been through how many years of democracy after apartheid, and we're still experiencing these type of things. We're still experiencing the black inequality all the way until now. So the rebirth would be just engaging with the content, engaging with the audience, and how we can overcome this, and hopefully in the times when we're older, and the things that would have changed in the industry, in our lives, and for future people, future children.
Okay, so the color psychology. I love using color. I think that's just my signature. So the color psychology for the film, I had 3 lighting setups. Firstly, a sunset vibe, which I used yellow and red for when the 2 characters die, Sfiso and Sipo. And the reason why I chose that sunset vibe, because when I watch the sunset, I find it very peaceful. Very, very peaceful. And when you die, you become at peace. Everything's still and you become at peace. So that's why I wanted to use that sunset vibe for the death. And then when we moved into the memories, I was going to use red. So I used red, green, and blue. And that represented life for green. And the red and blue represented the rage and anger. So, and how I used it to experiment is when Lily died, I took away the life in Siso. I took away the positivity, and he was left with the red and blue. So he was left with the rage, and he was left with the anger, and that's why he literally did what he did. So that's how I played with my color psychology.
Surrealism has influenced the story because it makes us look at characters from the black community. So it has influenced the story into how I'm going to be able to tell that story. Because in my department, I'm mainly just looking at the dialogue and the ambience. With the dialogue, I'm just looking at the Zulu language. That's bringing that root of the black community, how we communicate, how we phrase things, our language, our dialect, how we speak, and yeah. So also with ambient, I'm just looking at the wind textures. How does it sound like to be in South Africa, Durban? What would you hear? Would you hear taxis? Would you hear cows? What exactly would you hear? So it brings that black element into it. Surrealism and characters. I feel like it creates identity. Looking at of surrealism and characters, because I'm going to say this: we're looking at a story that has to do with the black community and black South Africans. So looking at the characters specifically, it's mainly just their cultures, their cultural background as black people. So we're looking at different characters. We're also looking at how you can be black but also be different from other black people, and how you speak can be entirely different from other black people, even though you're situated in the same area and living through the same but also different experiences.
So you know how normally how a film works, there's a beginning, middle, and end. And our film being non-linear, meaning that we can jump around from middle being in the beginning and the end being in the middle, type of thing. So that changes the mood and tone of it, because, for example, how the scene where Ulili dies, the mood is very like down to earth and very slow paced. So and then judging from where there's life in a scene, the mood is very upbeat and very fast, so it differs from each scene.
So now stepping into the shoes of being a production designer. At first it was really nice because looking at more like locations. So first of all, locations are very important and you must always have a backup because things happen. So securing locations, secure, and ensure that it's secured, and secure more than one, secure 3 that give you the look and also show the differences and the disparity between the two economic statuses that you're trying to show. But then now, because of the pandemic and when coronavirus came through, we now had to switch things up completely. But I actually prefer that because it made our film look more experimental. I think if we had shot on location, we would have run the risk of looking rather normal. We would have had the house, we would have all those things. But now being in a film studio, we got to take reference and look at a film, Dogville, which I used as a production design reference, where our home and the house of Sfiso and Sipho were now drawn out with chalk, how the cast, very minimalistic, how the cast had to interact in that space, but still maintaining that imagery of unequal scenes where you would have Sipho's house on one side of the street and Sfiso's house on the other side of the street, and how to bring that from paper into screen, right from the sizing, because we had to build the whole studio using all of the flats, painting them all black, and having the sizing where Sfiso's house was sized this small, and then on the other side of the street you had Sipho's house, which was literally double the size of Sfiso's home, to account and to see the differences, the different living standards in which they're coming from. So just having that always in mind.
And everyday life and everyday people and everyday thoughts and everyday situations, that inspires me a lot. And the sort of ideas that lie beneath sort of what we see every day, because the word is just the word, what it means and how it makes people feel, that has a lot to do with so much that's never spoken about, so much that can't be put into words. So that's sort of reality that I look at when I look at people's lives and what they say about themselves, what they feel about themselves in situations, and how certain situations unfold. And again, the miscommunications and the lack of understandings that can exist between people, and how that causes conflicts and people reading signals differently and so on and so forth. I think that really is what made me want to make this story. My whole plan is basically, I was I'm gonna let this film write itself, because I felt like so many of the pieces were already in place, so much of the planning was already done, and so much of the understanding was already shared. I felt like there wasn't much more I could do or say without sounding redundant or repetitive now, because it felt like I was saying the same things again and again. So my whole plan or vision on set was I was basically going to let it shoot itself for as much as I can and intervene only in moments where I felt like, okay, it's not going the way that like it could or the way that it should. And yeah, I think that was the plan, and it sort of went off the rails one or two times, but experiments do that, so yeah.
Well, Sfiso's a really Sfiso's a complicated character, I feel. He's one who's at first he's privileged. He's one who's seen as envy, but then it's something that he doesn't see himself. He doesn't acknowledge himself as Fiso, and there's a lot that goes around Fiso's life and who he is and what makes this character and makes this person Fiso. What strings coming from his mom, not knowing his father, and the background that he's living in all contributes to the way Sfiso sees himself in the world. So yeah, I think Sfiso is someone who's trying to find his feet, who's trying to find the truth, but also does not know what the future holds for him. Yeah. Going into character for Sfiso for me was more of trying to find space for myself, because I'm a person who's ngumuntu wabantu. I like being amongst people. I like finding my energy and finding inspirations from people. So with this Fiso, it was something where I had to like leave that all aside and tap into me and try and resonate it more with how I'm feeling and how I'd handle this situation. So that's really how I got into character. I had to find my own space, be myself, be by myself essentially, and try and block everything out from the world, create my own world, which was the most important thing about this piece.
Okay, so Ulili is a woman who's in her mid-40s who loves and cares for her son, who goes to the moon and back for her son. Basically protects her son. Nena herself goes through her challenges, like having to fight the battle of just surviving sickness now, which is she's suffering from cancer, and yeah. Man, just the question, how did I just the focus, Vela, I took it from home. So by the time I was on set, Vela, I was focused. I knew what I wanted, how I wanted the character to be portrayed. So I think I started at home. So by the time I was on set, Vela besingi focus. So how did I prepare? As just going back to my scripts and just keep on reminding myself, Guti, how am I going to go about trying to portray this character? So.
And then, what attracted you to the story?
What attracted me?
Well, Nonjabulo is an 18-year-old girl who's just fresh out of high school. She just matriculated. She doesn't really have a sense of direction. She doesn't know where to go. So she's just chilling. She's from a privileged background and she lives with her brother most of the time.
Characterization moments on set. How did you get into character before going for a take?
Well, with every scene, before every scene, I would picture myself or find a substitute that will help me to fulfill the desired scene that I'm supposed to act in. So all the substitute that I used really helped me, and I believe that there were moments where I was actually the character and not myself. So I believe that I was able to push myself, get out of the comfort zone, and just play the character. Yeah.
Okay, here's the thing. Vele there is a relationship la. I've worked with him before, so on its own that was great working with him again. So that wasn't hard about building something already.
Sebenza into ekhona.
Yebo.
Sijwayelene, siyazana, sesibonana. I think inkinga kade sinayo nje ukuthi ngakukhulisa kanjani ngibe ingane mina nje nabo ngibe ingane yakho.
Yeah.
Wena boma wami.
Yeah.
Kodwa nje
And the scene itself was kind of intense, abo. So it was our first time together working on that kind of scene. So that's a challenge as well that we come across together. So, but what I like about Umane Guti, it was easy for us to feed each other's energy about.
True.
So on each take, we are able to about Guti how we're gonna work on improving about our scene, on bettering our scene. So,
on that note, just to add on Guti, whenever the director would call cut, and you have to come back, bringing up the energy back was much easier, because I guess of the comfortability that I have with Fizzy, saying so wherever we left off was easy to pick it up emotionally and physically from there.
That's it.
Continue.
And so what I like about this nigga here is Umane ngimazi as a clown. Well, ngifunde na eclassini. I know the serious side of him. I know the clown side of him. And what I like on that day when we shot in that scene is you kind of put me on my toes. Okay, serious. The money that I knew before would be like, hiya. Face was tell you about that vibe of just chilling and being. But the fact that you took your character so seriously, it made me be like focus. Because there were times whereby I'll lose focus in a way because of the takes and the breaks. But when Anjay, you were able to get back to the zone, so it made me be like, okay, sharp. My son is doing the thing, so.
I hope I wasn't feisty. Yeah.
No, not at all.
I hope so.
I can also,
For me, I don't want to say it was a challenge, but it was quite like a young bumpy ride on the road, because Kushle and I know each other from class and we are friends, but then we also not very close friends to an extent where we know each other's buttons that well, But then because we already covered the acquaintances and we know each other from performance school throughout the years, it was easier to apply the technique, the form, the craft over someone you know than someone you don't know. And building the chemistry, I feel like I'm sorry, all this gets taken away by the smile, but building the chemistry, it's like this, it's taking a leap of faith, there was a time where where Chris is like, yo, I saw you, man. There was a moment you just looked deep into her eyes, you were lost there for a second. I'm just like, I took a leap of faith, man. It's just how it is, it comes with the job, it comes with the criteria that even though you don't know, you gotta trust the person that you're acting with, that they got you as much as you have them. So, yeah, I think it was taking a leap of faith.
So, as my colleague has spoken.
Oh, so funny.
We don't know each other that well, but I can say, Wuti, we have that ground where we're just comfortable around each other. And he made it so easy on set because the chemistry, it just came out of nowhere. I was just like, oh my gosh, this guy is charming. And I went with the flow. I was like, oh my gosh, I was on Kaz, I was on Chow, and then it just flowed. I was just so comfortable around him. It just made it so easy to work with him,
I think it's because of this whole film as a whole, because it's just it's emotionally captivating. It grips you. It just sinks its claws into your heart.